let's talk about the CFTC. CFTC Chair Rostin Behnam says, no way, not even close. We weren't even close to approving that thing the FTX was talking about. What are you talking about? We had nothing to do with those schmoes. Get out of here with this. Anyway, that's what he's saying now that FTX is down and out. We can talk about this and potentially the cozy relationship that Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX was alleged to have with some U.S. regulators. And this is interesting that they are clearing the air, saying this plan for settling and clearing derivatives, nah, we're still thinking about it. If that, whatever, no big deal. Will, you got any thoughts on this one? Tossing it to you.
Yeah, I'll snag it. I think this was an important one just in terms of the regulatory stance for FTX. FTX was cozying up to a lot of different people. In fact, I'm sort of confused how they had the manpower in order to do this. I mean, they were talking to everybody in Capitol Hill. They're talking to people in New York, talking to people in Chicago, trying to basically change some of the rules. Some things in favor of the industry, some things in favor of FTX and Alameda. If you look back to the whole debate between Sam Bankman-Fried and Eric Voorhees right before CoinDesk uncovered the huge bombshell, that is a good little review of what FTX was up to and changing DeFi regulations. For this story, the CFTC, this is about like how trades are settled on exchanges. And the CFTC basically mandates that trades are settled in a certain way that protects a lot of different people who are using commodities, from soybeans to corn to Bitcoin. There's a lot of different things that are classified as commodities, and they trade in a certain way, and they have traded in a certain way for decades. And the CFTC has overseen that for its entire history. FTX came into the room and, they're advertising for digital assets and they want things to be done a certain way and they wanted things to be settled a certain way in order to benefit their industry. There's some other proponents of the space that did not like that because, soybeans trade a little bit different than Bitcoin and it's not necessarily fair for the new kid on the block to come in and change regulations. So there's definitely some ruffled feathers, shall we say, about that whole situation. Doesn't seem like anything came of it, but I will note that there's a nice quote from Behnam here at the end of the story saying, FTX and its management team came in quite frequently. As a chairman of the agency, I wanted to be squarely involved to make sure that I was seeing what was happening in terms of the process with all parties able to participate, he said. So definitely interesting that FTX was able to get in the room. Just think about them being such a young exchange, only 2-3 years old, and able to get in these rooms with all these legislators and regulators. That's what has me questioning things a little bit. It seems like other people don't have as much of an easy time. But I'm going to throw it over to Sam, get your opinion on this.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing about this entire FTX regulator, government, congressperson link is that while it is unique in the crypto sphere, this is just a thing that happens with business, with interests, where corporate entities have a cozy relationship with the people who make the laws around them. So we've seen the kind of narratives around that spiral out, partially as a result of this, of course, ending up being, it looks like a fraud that ended up toppling, but partially it's because this is, like Will, you've said, a immature industry. It's only been around for a couple of years. And it is kind of weird that an entity that is so new, FTX, would have these relationships so quickly into its tenure. But this entire story and the broader context around it does have me wondering a little bit more about not only, why did FTX have this special role? I'm actually not quite as curious about that side of things like a lot of people are. I'm more curious what's going to happen next in terms of whether these folks who were willing to sit down with FTX are actually going to be willing to sit down with any other new crypto entities moving forward. Who are they supposed to sit down with from Uniswap? Or are they going to sit down with A16Z? I guess they've been around for a while. Are they just going to sit down with banks who are now, I guess, a little bit happier with crypto since they've got their heads wrapped around it, even though we are, of course, in this weird bear market where people, hate crypto for a lot of good and bad reasons. But anyway, I'm super curious who is going to be defining things moving forward, because it's not just going to be legislators and regulators sitting down alone coming up with these rules themselves. I'll pass it to you, Jen.
I think the CFTC, I've said this before, was tired of living in the SEC's shadows. They wanted that budget. They saw Sam Bankman-Fried as this crypto glory kid who they could get into a conversation with and potentially introduce new bills that would allow them to oversee this industry, which they've been quite vocal about wanting to oversee. And so I think that's what really motivated the partnership. It is so worrying now that we know about what what was going on behind the scenes at FTX, that this relationship could be built, without the proper due diligence happening. I do want to reference a little piece of information from the Washington Post, because I thought I read this morning and thought, that's interesting. So the Washington Post said that behind the scenes, according to Terry Duffy, who's the CEO at Chicago Mercantile Exchange, agency officials wanted to approve the proposal. They staunchly defended it in conversation with him this spring, so much so that Duffy, an opponent, told them he would sue the agency over it. And so I think as we start to hear more about what was going on behind the scenes and what the CFTC's real motivations are, we're going to see a lot of regulators start to pump the brakes. I feel like it's a little bit damaging to read all of this. So anyways, that's my thoughts.